Let's check a couple of things. I think we should be good. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Welcome back to the Sober Witch Life podcast, my dear sweet friends. I am Sunshine, the pink haired sober witch. And I'm going to remind you, I think it reminds you in the opening when you're listening to the podcast, but like, subscribe, do all of those kind of great things. If you ever want to know what's going on, check out the soberwitch.life website as well. Anyways, let's get into today's topic. I've been thinking about this probably for the last, I don't know, maybe week and a half. Just this, it's been rattling around in my head, right? And so I think you guys know, if you've heard any of these, like, I write about these topics, I do the podcast. I want this to be, consumed in all sorts of various different ways. And so for the last 2 weekends now, we're like officially in spring here in Michigan, right? We officially, and even the weather is showing it, and the grounds and everything outside is starting to show it. And so the last 2 weekends, I have spent time out in my garden. So I'm like a crazy person that last year decided I was going to like kick everything up a notch. The year before, I had like just a small part of my backyard was just one small garden with some peppers and tomatoes and some beans, right? And then last year, I loved it so much that I went all out. And not only did I put in 4 raised beds in my backyard, till a whole, like, I don't know, maybe an eighth of the backyard so that it could be cut gardens, put up a greenhouse. As though that wasn't enough, I have like 35 pots that I fill, and then took the whole front yard. I shouldn't say the whole front yard, like 75% of my front yard has been converted, in essence, into a native plant and flower garden, because I'm crazy like that. So it takes a lot of time and energy, and I love to do it because, it helps me move my body. It's this really beautiful, mindful act. But as I've been in the garden these last 2 weekends, I've been thinking a lot about how it really represents recovery, right? I've been dirty. Like, I think I do. I actually still have dirt underneath my fingernails right now, even though I've taken the nail brush to them, right? So recovery asks us to be dirty sometimes, right? It asks us, to realize that healing is not like clean and polished and perfect. And sometimes it even hurts, right? Think about, what comes to mind right now is, if you have someone, there are times that they will literally like even break your bones to be able to heal them and set them right. You have to go through surgery to like get better, right? If anybody has ever done shadow work, sometimes you got to face the really scary shadows, the difficult shadows to get to the other side of the healing. And just like gardening, sometimes it looks like sticking our hands into all of the mess, Sometimes it means pulling apart entire things that we've, avoided for years, in order to rebuild it, right? I'll give you an example. I had someone helping me cut my lawn for many years, and I switched to a new provider. This was a number of years ago. And they made the horrible mistake of allowing grass clippings to go over into the very small beds that I had in my front. And I could not get the grass out of it. I had to undo those entire beds, which was the catalyst for taking over the whole lawn. And when we have to do these, like tear something completely apart in order to rebuild it, it doesn't mean that we failed, right? At some point, you just have to like get your hands into the dirt and just get at it, right? Redo it. It wasn't about fixing anymore. It was about tending. tending to the garden. And this was like the aha. Recovery is not about fixing your life, it's about tending to it, nurturing it, taking care of it. So, if we think about life in and of itself as the garden, then recovery is the act of gardening, right? And I might lose a whole handful of you that have no desire to listen to about gardening, but we've got some gardening metaphors that we're going to go through, right? Right? Gardening, just kind of like recovery again, is not a one-time fix, right? We're not going to have this dramatic before and after transformation and then it's just set in stone, right? It becomes a daily ongoing relationship with whatever it is that you're growing, right? What is struggling? What needs your attention? I look at the weeds that show up in our garden as the habits, the pattern, the chaos, the choices that are keeping us stuck in pain, right? The things we have to watch because they could destroy us, so to speak. And just like in a real garden, though, not all weeds are inherently bad, right? Some of them show up because something underneath it needs attention, right? So I have this plant app on my phone and I'll go and I'll look to see what's growing. And something that has been really curious to me is a couple of the weeds that I've seen have started out in my front yard indicate that there's a presence of heavy metal in the soil. They are literally there to help pull the heavy metal out of the soil, right? They have a purpose, okay? But the challenge with weeds is if we let them go unchecked, they will take over everything. They will choke out the flowers. They will block sunlight. They will rob the life from what we're actually trying to grow, right? Same thing, those bad habits, those patterns, the chaos, the choices that are keeping us stuck. They will do that. They will rob us of the life that we're truly trying to live. And what we're trying to live, the soil. So the soil I looked at as our day-to-day life. It's where everything is going to happen. It's where we plant our new behaviors. It's where we make the choices. It's where we're either nurturing growth or allowing things to decay, right? It's where the weeds are going to grow if, or overtake things if we let them, right? And the seeds are all of the new opportunities, the new boundaries we get to set, the new way of being that we're trying, often very awkwardly, always imperfectly, right? I have a t-shirt that literally says perfectly imperfect. If there's one thing I do really well, I'm perfect at, it's imperfection. Right? And then we think about the seasons in and of themselves that these gardens go through. It reminds us that none of this is static. They all go through cycle, right? We have to plant, we have to nurture, we have to harvest, we have to reflect. Like life will take us through this, right? That soil will go through that process. And as I looked at that and observed all of this, I thought a little bit more about the weeds. Okay. Especially because we had about 5 days of rain, right? And so for any of the gardeners that are out there, you'll know if you really need to weed, you need to do some serious weeding, wet the ground first or do it after it rains, right? And I noticed how some of the weeds would come out so easy, right? So easy, just pop them right out. Others resisted. Their roots had gone really, really deep, had runners, had extended throughout underneath the ground, right? I'd pull it up and I would just start breaking apart, and I'd be like, darn it, I got to go back and I got to find out where it's at. And recovery is the same. For some, putting down a substance or stopping a behavior is really easy, right? Just stopping it. It's everything that comes after it that becomes the really hard work. And for others, relapses, maybe after relapses, starting over and over again is where the struggle is until you finally get that weed and something begins to shift. It made me think about how there is no single path through recovery. There's no like clean, predictable order and way. There's no checklist. Nobody's going to be able to give you a checklist. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of programs that are going to say if you follow these steps, if you go down this path, if you take these patterns, you do these things, right? You look at statistics, they paint a different story, right? To me, though, there is really only one thing that leads to successful recovery. And that's the willingness to keep tending, to keep trying, even when it feels like it's not working. Because if you don't tend to your garden, if you don't tend to your life, if you don't tend to your recovery, it's not going to stay neutral, right? Again, it's not this before and after transformation. It will become overgrown, chaotic, filled with things that you never intentionally planted. You will wake up one day and go, how the hell did I get here? You may find that things are rotting, decaying. There's old junk. There are things that once had purpose but are now just taking up space. If you've ever seen a yard that's become completely overrun, you will watch that nature, Mother Nature in and of itself, will eventually even try to take down a house, a structure. If it can't get it by strangling it through roots in a tree, it may just have the tree topple over on top of it. The same thing happens in our lives. When we avoid our work, when we ignore what we know is true or needs to happen, when we tell ourselves it's not that bad, we're choosing not to tend to our lives, and something will grow in that space anyways, whether we want it to or not. And over time, it's going to become harder to see what's actually there, harder to move, harder to breathe, harder to respond, harder to clean. And that's not because you're incapable of it, but because nothing has been given the attention that it needs. When you do start taking those steps to tend to your life, even in small ways, by walking outdoors and just picking up one piece of garbage, right? By just cutting the lawn, by just throwing away the old pot that has the flowers are no longer growing in, something will begin to shift. It's not going to become perfect overnight, but it will become more manageable. There'll be more space, there'll be more clarity, there's more intention, and you'll start to notice the small things, right? Let's say you cleared the weeds away. You may start to see something new and beautiful sprout, a new thought pattern, a moment of peace, a boundary that becomes easy to hold. All of these little tiny sprouts become things to pay attention to because you played a role in it being there. That sense of participation, like active participation in our life, matters. It reminds us that we're not powerless in our lives, that we're not stuck with whatever happens to grow. You have a say in what stays, what goes, and what you choose to nurture. Now, us gardeners know, every now and again, there's a weed that will really try your patience. If you've ever tried to get rid of morning glories, if you've ever tried, to get rid of, I know I had pokeweed for a while, and now it's some creeping Charlie, right? Every now and again in life, we even have weeds that are going to keep coming back. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a pattern, maybe it's a habit. For me, one of those has been workaholism. It just shows up real quietly, real sneakily, right? And it looks like me being productive at first, right? Checking off a whole bunch of boxes, getting through a to-do list. And this makes it really easy to justify because it feels like I'm being responsible. It feels like I'm being driven. It feels like I'm even like spending my time in a worthy place. But if I don't keep it in check, it's going to take over everything, and my days will become consumed with work. I'll have little time for rest, connection, or really enjoying life, like the things I'm literally building or creating, like this beautiful house, a beautiful relationship. It becomes a cycle that looks functional on the outside but feels empty, draining on the inside. And I've had to pull that weed for a long time, probably since 2017, multiple times a year. And I don't know if it'll ever fully disappear. But my relationship to it has changed. I watch for it now. I can pay attention to it. I can see when it's starting to take root. I catch it a lot earlier. I tend to it before it has the chance to take over in the same way. That's progress. That's me tending to my garden. That's me in recovery. Of course, as I say this, it's important to remember that not every weed needs to be removed immediately. You know, in my garden, I have a couple of plants that many would label as weeds, but they are serving a purpose, right? They feed pollinators. They bring some sense of balance. They add something meaningful to the space. So I'm going to be watching them. I'll tend to them. I'll make sure they don't take over. And sometimes relationships can be like that. Sometimes people are just going to need boundaries in your life, not removal. Some people themselves are on their own learning and growing journeys, and the relationship can be tended into in a way that supports you both. But you'll always be able to feel the difference when something is no longer healthy, when it shouldn't be there anymore, when it's not serving you anymore. Your body is going to tell you. Your throat is going to tighten up. You'll walk on eggshells, tiptoe around things, rehearse what you're going to say, begin to shrink, hide. And at some point, you're going to have to decide whether you continue to tend to that or whether it's time to pull it out. And that decision is not you being cruel or selfish. It's you caring for and loving yourself enough to tend to your garden at that time. And we don't always see what it is that we've planted, right? Recovery is a bit like that. You know, if you think about it, or or we have to take drastic actions, right? So I think about this from a gardening perspective. One, we plant seeds and we don't always get to see them growing, right? I've got some seeds in my greenhouse right now that can take up to 12 weeks for germination. 12 weeks, 3 months. 3 months, right? I know it's there. I know I've planted them, but it's going to take a while. So there's work going on underneath the surface. And there are other times, right, where we have a plant and it sprouts and it's germinated and it's growing. And the best thing that we can do for it is to cut it. Because the roots need to grow stronger in order for it to strengthen itself and bear the level of fruit that we want it to bear, or it could bear. We have to cut it. I saw a video today of a guy that did an experiment with a jalapeno pepper plant. Same two plants, like same seeds, same dirt, same size container, same watering schedule. And the only difference that it did is as it got about 3 inches tall, it cut the top part of one of the pepper plants. By the end of the growing season, the plant that it had cut produced 3 times the amount of peppers as the one that they didn't. And recovery asks us to do this too. It asks us to do work that might not make sense in the moment. It asks us to do work that we can't even see the results for. To have conversations that we don't want to face memories we would rather avoid, and to sit with emotions that feel uncomfortable and overwhelming. it would have been easier for me to avoid some of the hardest moments that I faced in my recovery, to push them aside or sweep them under the rug and pretend like they weren't there, to keep moving forward without ever having to address them. Tending to those things were painful and uncomfortable, but over time, they created relief. They opened up new pathways, new doorways, new relationships, new experiences. It allowed something stronger to take root beneath the surface, something that could actually support the life that I was building. Now we go back again. Some days it's hard to get out into the garden. It's hard to do that tending work. Not every day needs to be. And you need to remember that. Some days, tending to the garden can just be watering, right? Meaning all you can do is get in a dang shower. Some days, all you can do is sit there outside and just watch it and maybe deadhead one or two flowers. Cool. Maybe that's just you putting your dishes away. And some days, it looks like canceling everything that you have planned and staying inside to rest. Tending to our garden does not always mean that we have to expel all of this effort. Sometimes it means just allowing us to be. So I would encourage all of you listening to do a little practice in this upcoming week, or one of the upcoming weeks. If you're not sure where to start, keep it really simple and try to keep it grounded into something you can follow through with. Start just by deciding that you're willing to tend to your life for 1 week. Hey, I'm going to garden just this week. Take a look around and figure out what's not serving you. Is it a habit? Is it a person? Is it some kind of behavior or thought pattern that you have? What's draining your energy? What's causing you pain? And make a decision about that. You don't have to act immediately on it, but just decide, what are you going to do? What are you going to change? And when you're ready, make that change. Maybe it's setting a boundary with someone. Maybe it's choosing to not have that bowl of ice cream at the end of the day. Maybe it's not picking your phone up when you get up in the morning. Whatever it is, just make a different choice. And then witness it. Let it matter to you. Reflect on what it was once providing and let it go. Notice how it feels to have tended to your life, even in that little small way. I like to think about the fact that I love and enjoy to garden. But there's something that I've realized over the years, because I've been doing this since I was in my 20s, like literally gardening in some way, shape, or form. Even though I enjoy it so much, it is so much more enjoyable when I get to do it with someone else. When I get to show someone else what I've done. When I get to snap that picture and say, look, I got all the weeds pulled. Look, I got the new mulch down. Look, the bed is completely cleared. Look at the seeds as they've started to come up. I say this because in recovery, it's not that you can't do it by yourself, but it becomes so much more enjoyable when you find someone that you can do it with. When you remember and you have someone there to remind you, my partner said to me, we don't have to get this all done today. We'd been at it for 5 hours yesterday and there was still more done. And he said the same thing, like, we don't have to do it all today. Right? That's what having someone to do this with is like. They get to remind you. They get to cheerlead you. They get to celebrate with you. They get to sit with you and sadness when the seeds that you planted in February didn't germinate and you got to start all over again. So I'd ask you to sit and be honest. What is your need? What in your life right now needs tending? And trust that you are capable of starting even if it's small. And if you'd like someone to do it with, come join us. Join a circle. Join us in the Recovery Coven. I promise you, we will celebrate you tending your garden. Until next time, my dear sweet friends, much love from me to all of you.